Umang, Alan, thank you so much for joining me today. Could you introduce yourselves to our watchers? Umang, let's start with yourself.
Sure. So hi, my name's Umang. My proper job is I'm a paediatrician. I still work in the NHS 1 day a week. I'm also the Chief Clinical Information Officer at Microsoft.
Fab. Alan?
Hi, I'm Alan Payne. I'm the Group Product and Engineering Director at the Access Group. I'm responsible for about 42 products crossing local government, care and mental health and community health.
Fab. You're going to be speaking at a panel discussion today at Digital Health Rewired. Can you briefly explain what that's going to be about? Alan, why don't we go for you?
So we want to have a conversation around scaling and scaling AI inside frameworks that aren't just legal, but have to accommodate the ethical and usability of those algorithms. They have to be there for a purpose.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Umang, obviously AI is kind of set off very, very quickly. And now we're at a point where we're moving away from pilots and hoping to achieve scalability, like you said. What do you think the biggest change is that is allowing us to scale AI into healthcare? And is it actually happening across the NHS? Are we actually seeing that adoption is happening successfully?
Yeah. So a few questions. So I think one, you've got to have that sweet spot, haven't you, of enough people wanting to do something differently is part one. And I think we've had that for ages, right? So everyone has known like there's always more patients than there are clinicians to serve them and others. So there's always been high demand. So there's always been the demand side. But I think now what we're seeing is the belief that the tooling is coming that can help support do things in different ways. And we've not had that before for a while. We've had it a couple of times. So diagnostics is a good example, right? So I'm not old enough to quite remember before MRI scanners and CT scanners and other bits and pieces. But there was a time, of course, when you're like, well, I don't have the tests to be able to get the diagnoses to help treat patients. Of course, now we take for granted that we can have all of those things, but those were big revolutions of technology and evolutions of the processes that go around them. I think we're seeing the same today, and that's like partners with the Access Group and others are making those things real. And as a doctor, seeing it, I'm like, I can touch and feel this stuff now. I can see how it's going to help me, and because I can see it, and I know that I can sort of understand it in a way that I couldn't do before. And that's what large language models and AI have done. So no longer do you need to have a degree of mathematics to get the concept. You're like, okay, I get it, right? I can type something into ChatGPT and I get an output. Oh, good. And actually my patients are doing that. So maybe if I can do something along those lines too, can we all get to a better place? So we've got the demand there. We've also got the tooling that's there. And then finally, I think what we're seeing is that we all know that we can't keep on doing the same thing and expect the results to change, right? So I don't think there is, by the way, like great job being at Microsoft where you can see global healthcare systems. No healthcare system in the world says, hey, I've nailed this. I know, like, we're doing it really well. So everyone's going like, what can you do? And as the NHS, we are by far and away the biggest single provider healthcare system by like massively. So even when you look at Kaiser or Mayo Clinic and other people, they're like 12, 20 million people, nowhere near 60 million. They have nowhere near the diversity of the stuff we've got that we're doing across the NHS. So I think when people look at going, well, if there's one system that's going to try and lead the way, then it's got to be big, it's got to be diverse, and it's got to have some cultural capability to try and do something new. And really proudly, I think that's where we are as an NHS.
That's brilliant.
And just to build on that, fantastic answer. But for us, it's also around how do we get this out at scale without compromising the quality. And therefore, starting with reducing friction in the care system is going to be a lower entry point and actually add more quality value. So, for example, just the ability to do appointment scheduling across multiple domains should be a very straightforward activity, yet it takes hours in many cases because people are using phones rather than using digitization. So that friction reduction has the opportunity to release capacity for a crazy thought of carers actually being more at point of care and doing what they want to do. And then if you extend that further, as Umesh quite correctly pointed out, there are now tools available with agentic AI that allow subject matter experts to seamlessly create their own pathways. And one of the dreams we've all got Hamish and I both share this, is to create cross-continuing pathways. We're no longer locked into silos.
Yeah.
How do we ensure that we're not locked into silos? I'm thinking, the NHS historically has encountered issues with legacy tech and care and trusts getting locked into old contracts. So how can we ensure that we are able to continue to innovate within our healthcare system?
Actually, the problem isn't a technical one in that particular scenario. The problem is, as basic as they sound, data sharing agreements, and just being willing more to share data for people that need it in a proper, secured way. And there are technologies also available to supplement that, which can provide linkages into those old legacy systems with what are called model context protocols, MCPs, which allow you, no matter how old and gnarly the thing is, you can still unlock it and get it to the point of care where it's needed.
Cool. So let's go back to trust then, which is obviously a big theme that you guys are talking about later. So are there difficulties with trust or mistrust between clinicians and mistrust between patients when it comes to AI? Are AI systems mistrusted for different reasons between these two types of people? And if so, how exactly do we navigate that? How do we ensure that trust is implemented early on in AI?
What an impossible question to answer, right? Like I say, so I think the challenge with trust is it's super hard to earn, super easy to give away, or whatever the analogy is. And I think there's something around these systems that promise so much hope that often we go, like, have we realistically set outcomes for them that are going to be realistic? Look, I really want this brand new, I love Claude, or I love ChatGPT, or I love Copilot, or I love one of these things for something that is low stakes, right? Like helping me rewrite a document, whatever else it might be that's not all that important. And then I wish I could have some of that in a clinical context that would help me understand or do something else. What's really hard to know is how much of that is safe to be put through when, like I say, the stakes of it are so high. I think we don't know the answer to that yet, and I think it's our job, the partnerships we've got, to say, well, let's start building some of these solutions, let's start building some of these processes, let's work sort of hand in glove with doctors, nurses, IT teams, chief executives, the system, to say, well, let's sort of stress test it, and as safely as we can work out where we're going. I'll give you a quick story because I quite like it, right? So we were talking about Copilots a lot as Microsoft. And so I was like, we're talking continually about Copilots. I've never actually spoken to a pilot about what a Copilot does. I don't know the difference between a Copilot, an autopilot, what I didn't know, right? So, I've got some friends that are pilots, so I said, look, I'll pay for the drinks, let's go to the pub and talk, just tell me what the thing is. And the pilots were like, well, it's interesting. So there's a couple of things that came out of it. So one of them was, if you're doing a long journey, of course you need two people that can fly the plane, right? So that's just standard. So having that support is one thing. They said that the reality is, of course, the autopilot does some of this stuff for us, holds us at a steady altitude. And the quip is that we don't really ever fly the plane, we only do it for takeoff and landing, and the rest of it's done by autopilot. But you don't realise all of the other stuff that we do in between that. And the fact that the autopilot's holding a steady altitude means that we've got the headspace to be able to deliver, to be able to check crosswinds and deliver other bits and pieces. And I think in healthcare, and we've been talking about this a lot with what we'll be talking about later, it's going, well, that's what we need to do about. How do we help doctors and nurses not continually try and hold the right altitude? We can do some of that using this new technology, and that's relatively safe, then allowing the clinicians to look at other things, make sure they reduce errors. And I think when we can get to that point, you can start building more trust. The punchline to that story is that as I was leaving, I was like, well, I'm still not entirely convinced, can you just fly a plane autonomously, right? It feels like it already has all of the assets to do it. And the pilot said to me, I won't name him, but he said, look, this is my advice to you in one sentence. It's I would never get onto a plane that doesn't have autopilot as a function, but I would equally never get onto a plane that didn't have a pilot, and I think that was exactly what we're finding in healthcare. Like, I would never, I think we're going to get to the point, I would never get into a system that doesn't have some technological support to be able to free up the show. But I equally don't think we're ever going to do it without people in the loop.
Fantastic. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to add to that, actually, the pilot analogy, I'm going to continue that. I was talking to a CCIO for a very large aviation company, and I was asking him to explain the psychological processes they go through. And he explained that nowadays, with the latest tech, that flying a plane is 99% boredom and 1% sheer terror. And it is because for the 99% of the flight, there are autonomous engines that are actually flying the plane. In terms of the trust side, it's incredibly important that we do work hand in hand. I could not agree more. Leaving a clinician out of the loop on anything you're doing clinical is a testament to failure. The same is also true for those friction points that I mentioned earlier. The ability for you to test and prove that out in a controlled environment, allowing for that release capacity before we get onto more complex things like clinical decision support and AI actually starting to make decisions, which does need to be very heavily controlled. We'll be talking about the concept of circuit breakers and small language models later.
Yeah, I do want to quickly touch on that, Alan, because we had a bit of a conversation off camera about this. So obviously one of the big problems with AI is people worrying about hallucinations, and research shows that actually whenever you have an AI system, you will always get misalignment and you'll always encounter hallucinations. That's just going to be a consistent problem. So I want to know what the Access Group has been doing specifically about these circuit breakers that kind of offers a solution to this problem.
So we've taken a multifaceted approach. For a start, if an AI by design tries to do something that is outside of its parameters, which are very heavily constrained, then it impacts something called a circuit breaker, which breaks the ability for it to do anything and calls for a human for help, which is always great and really reinforces keep the human in the loop at all times. But there are some other techniques as well. We have a who watches the watchman concept, where there's a completely independent AI that's monitoring how the one it's watching is behaving, looking for errors and bias and hallucination. And then finally, the concept of small language models, which are unique to what you're trying to achieve. So again, all these are about making sure that the use case that you're trying to solve, the problem you're trying to really get your hands around, is what is being delivered and not something else.
I don't know if you had Microsoft's perspective on how we manage this problem as well.
I think exactly that. Like, we've got to work out how, right? So we've got responsible AI principles. Going back to the NHS's role in all of this as well. Like we're such a big system. Like, we should be setting these standards, right? I do a talk, and one of my favourite quotes around it is somebody's going to have to be the Hogwarts for this. Who's going to school all this new technology? And I think it has to be us, right? And I think at the risk of making us. Alan can be Snape, but we'll, what are we going to do around, there's something about somebody is going to have to grasp the nettle of setting those standards, creating those frameworks, doing that. And I think we all agree with the concept, and I think it's the people that are, and I hope that we're in this camp, and we are definitely advocating, and we hope people will hold us to account to it, to say that we will stand up and try. And we will put some stuff out there. So rather than just saying we need to have it all, we need to have it all, yes, and then let's try and see if this works. And by the way, if it doesn't work, then we have to go back to the drawing board and try again, because, again, if we don't, I don't really know who will. And I think, as we'll all agree, and as we walk around the conference and things today, the cat is well and truly out of the bag. So it's not like we're going to be look, should we or shouldn't we do this? It's now it's here, we've got to be really quick to make sure we do it in the right way.
Fabulous. I think that's all we have time for. Did you have any final remarks, any messages that you want to send out to maybe smaller organisations that are trying to scale ethically and efficiently?
So from the Access Group, it would be very careful about the use case you're trying to solve. Don't try and go outside of that. Ensure that you've engaged your users, particularly if it's clinical, extremely so, to make sure it's safe, and also to look at the techniques for hallucination, easy for me to say, hallucination and bias reduction, which can be done at one level by prompting, but also there are other techniques, as we've just discussed. But yeah, all to play for, but do it safely.
And so come and talk to us. I mean, one of the things is you go, look, I think often people sit there, I meet lots of people like, I've got all of these ideas, I've been thinking about this thing, but I don't know how to solve that bit, and therefore I sort of gave up on it. I was like, I wish before you'd given up on it, you'd have just come and asked. Like, because we could probably have helped, because we'd have solved that before, or at least pointed you in the right direction. And I think for big companies, like where we are, like we love doing that. Like we love it when people are like, well, I don't know about this, and so like, do come and talk to us. It can feel maybe a bit intimidating, but if anybody wants to find me on LinkedIn, come to our stand, please try and reach out.
Brilliant. Thank you both for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.